How to Be a Hero, Take Up the Quest by Weldon, and we are on chapter 2. This is your ultimate purpose. Far above Whetstone and the Vikings of Crud, a girl unfolded a crumpled booklet and flattened it out. Her forehead wrinkled as she read, "A Guide to the 9 Worlds by Blood Runs Cold, leader of the Valkyries." The 9 Worlds. Imagine the biggest tree you can. No, bigger than that. Bigger. Bigger! It's Yggdrasil, and it makes your tree look like a bit of wilted broccoli. 9 whole worlds hang from Yggdrasil. That's how big it is. Asgard, right at the top, because it's the best. Home of the gods and ruled over by Odin. In Asgard, you can find Valhalla, Odin's great hall, where the greatest warriors come after they've died. There they can fight, feast and drink until Ragnarok, the battle at the end of the world. At Ragnarok, they will be called upon to fight the frost giants for Odin, but until then, it's basically party time. Vanaheim, home to the gods who aren't cool enough to be in Asgard. They're mostly interested in growing stuff. Inhabitants of Asgard are more interested in fighting. Alfheim, home of the elves. Yes, they have pointy ears. Yes, they giggle a lot. They're mostly harmless, but keep them where you can see them. Jotunheim, home of the giants, including our mortal enemies, the frost giants. They keep trying to break into Asgard. We keep beating them in battle. Lots of mountains, very good for skiing. Midgard. This is where you can find living humans, living their ordinary lives with ordinary horses, ordinary farms and ordinary families. Svartalfheim, home of the dwarves, a maze of caves and mines. They love tinkering with gold and making magical gadgets. Muspel, land of fire, ruled over by Sutter, a fire giant. Nice saunas. Helheim, home of Queen of the Dead, Hel. Yes, she named the place after herself. Tells you everything you need to know, really. Niflheim, land of the unworthy dead. The dragon Nidhogg lives here and chews on the roots of the world tree. He likes poetry, gold, and trampling anyone unlucky enough to be sent there. Who's who in Asgard? Odin, the All-Father, Spear Shaker, the terrifying one-eyed chief of the gods, the boss. Frigg, goddess of family, Odin's wife. Knows the future, but won't tell anyone. Loki, the trickster. Enjoys a joke. Approach with caution. Technically a fire giant, but Odin lets him live in Asgard because they're blood brothers. Thor, god of thunder. Do not touch his hammer. Seriously. Freya, goddess of love and sorcery. Likes cats. The Valkyries, elite female warriors. Valkyries are created by Odin, chief of the gods. Their main job is to bring the greatest warriors and heroes to Valhalla on their flying horses. At Ragnarok, the battle at the end of the world, they will lead the gods and warriors of Valhalla in the final clash against the frost giants. Travelling between worlds. It is possible to travel between worlds by flying or climbing through Yggdrasil's branches. Not easy, but possible. Only the gods and Valkyries have really got the hang of it. The giants have managed it a few times. More luck than anything else. Valkyries and Odin travel by flying horse. Loki has special shoes and Freya uses a magic cloak. The Bifrost Bridge links Asgard and Midgard. When humans on Midgard see it, they call it a rainbow. Magic. It's simple. Magic can only be created by magical creatures. Dwarves, elves, and to a certain extent, giants. All other magic comes from magical objects made by magical creatures, usually dwarves. Except for Odin. He learned how to do magic by hanging upside down from Yggdrasil for 9 days to discover the secrets of the runes. Fancy doing that? No. Then no magic for you. Lotta folded the much creased booklet and stuffed it under the leather bands of her wrist guards next to her brown skin. Lotta was a trainee Valkyrie, and today was going to be their first trip to collect fallen warriors from Midgard, so she didn't want to make any mistakes. "I can do this," she muttered, jamming a metal helmet on top of her dark curls and dodging through the narrow archway. "It's easy. Midgard is down, Asgard is up." She ducked to avoid a wonky wooden sign, just readable through the arrow holes and sword gouges, with the words, "Valkyrie Training School. Be the best in battle against the frost giants." Beyond the archway, a ragtag group of girls prepared their horses for a journey. They might be dressed in identical armour, but that was the only matching thing about them. Valkyries were born out of Viking battles across Midgard, and their appearance depended on where they had been created. Each of the trainees wore a breastplate of overlapping leather and metal strips with a linen shirt and heavy, pleated skirt. Thick bands of leather protected their forearms, and heavy boots with metal studs covered their feet. Lotta paused to pull her hairy socks up. They kept slipping down inside her boots and getting stuck under her feet. A pair of bored-looking Class 2 Valkyries was supposed to be supervising the trainees. A tall, black girl with elbow-length dreadlocks was speaking loudly to her friend, a girl with freckles, scattered across her pink-cheeked face. "Do you remember when we went on our first trip to Midgard? I got 78% on my collecting fallen warriors score for getting Jarl the Jelly Jowls back to Valhalla in one piece." The pink-cheeked girl rolled her eyes. "Whatever, Acrid." Lotta pulled her helmet firmly down over her ears. She was nervous enough without the older Valkyries making her feel worse. She scuttled over to the horse and fastened a bridle around its head. Tight black curls escaped from under her helmet and brushed her neck. Her horse tried to take a bite out of them. Lotta jerked out of the way of his yellow teeth and scowled. "Thor's beard, are you trying to look scary, Lotta?" called a sarcastic voice. Lotta turned to see a girl with long silver plaits and pale skin climbing onto her own horse. It stamped on the flagstones, hooves sending up blue sparks. "You look like you're desperate for a wee," the girl, Flay, said with a laugh. A girl with identical plaits and an identical gleeful look on her face sniggered. This was Flea, Flay's twin sister. Lotta carefully avoided looking at the twins and focused instead on swinging herself up into her saddle. Feeling embarrassed was not very Valkyrie-like, but then neither was Lotta. There were 3 classes of Valkyrie. Class 1s were full Valkyries who went out on the most important missions. They swooped low over Viking battlefields, inspiring the fighting with their blood-curdling cries. Class 2s were Valkyries who had almost finished their training. They were often used to send messages from the gods to the rest of the 9 worlds, or to inspire minstrels to write great stories about heroes and famous battles. Then there were Class 3s. They were the trainees and rarely got to do anything more exciting than practicing their axe throwing or reciting petrifying poetry. Most Valkyries started training when they were around 11 years old and would be Class 1s when they reached 18. Lotta had already been in the training school for over a year and was not doing well. Lotta jiggled her horse's reins, intending to move away from the sisters and into the wide courtyard. Her horse had other ideas. "No, Thigh-biter, stop it!" Lotta hauled on the reins as he twisted around, trying to bite her on the leg. He was always doing that. Thigh-biter jerked sideways, clonking Lotta's head on the low-hanging sign. "Ow!" Lotta tried to grab the sign as it swung back, the words Valkyrie Training School looming before smacking her between the eyes. Lotta pulled off her helmet and rubbed at her forehead. Acrid, the Class 2 Valkyrie with dreadlocks, sighed and crossed her arms. "You might as well get used to it, barnacle breath," Flay called from her horse as they trotted past. "You're going to be stuck as a Class 3 Valkyrie for a very long time." Lotta shoved the sign away and wedged her helmet back on top of her curls, trying to pull it low over her face. Flay might be saying what everyone else was thinking, but Lotta was determined to prove them wrong. In order to become full Valkyries, the trainees were supposed to show their mastery of 6 key skills. The current level of Valkyrie-ness of each trainee was shown on the circular shields they carried, which were split into segments, one for each skill. The segments glowed according to how well the trainee was doing in that particular element. Someone like Flay or Flea had a shield that glowed brightly in most of the segments. Lotta's shield, on the other hand, wasn't very bright at all, and several of the segments were almost dark, miles away from the 60% she needed in each section to move up to being a Class 2. Valkyrie Training School Report. Name: brings a lot of scrapes and grazes. Lotta. Class 3rd. Skill: fighting 35%. Axes should be thrown forward, Lotta. Good at polishing armour, though. Horse riding score 30%. Is distrusted by the horses and was chucked into a bush last week. Epic poetry score 28%. Let's just not mention your version of the saga of Svensson the Selfish. Transforming into swans percent 38%. Looks more like a duck. Keep questioning why it has to be a swan. It just does, Lotta. Serving mead in Valhalla score 53%. Not bad, but it is pretty easy. Collecting fallen warriors score 0%. First battle visit next week. Please don't mess it up. Overall hero score 31%. Signed, Blood Runs Cold, leader of the Valkyries. The girls spun around in their saddles to see a heavily armoured shadow squinting at them from the stable doorway. Leading her own massive warhorse, Blood Runs Cold, or Scold as she was known to the trainees, stepped into the courtyard. The Class 2 Valkyries snapped to attention. Scold was a statuesque woman with olive skin and powerful lungs. Legend said that she once cleared an entire battlefield with one enormous sneeze. Among her other jobs, she was responsible for training the Class 3s. Scold swung herself up onto her horse. Thunder, trumper. She turned to the assorted bunch of girl warriors. "I'm sure I don't have to remind you of how important today is," Scold roared. "Each of you was created from pure battle frenzy, brought to life by the breath of Odin. We may each come from separate places in Midgard, but we are united in one ultimate purpose, serving Odin by bringing back fallen warriors to fill Valhalla." She jabbed a finger in the direction of a huge wooden building behind them. It might not seem much from outside, but being picked to spend your afterlife in Valhalla was a Viking's idea of paradise. Being in Valhalla was quite a good setup, really. The fallen warriors were magically restored by Odin and spent their days on the field beside the hall, practicing their biting, their kicking, their gouging, and their sword fighting, ready to support Odin when the frost giants invaded. Then, all evening in the great hall, partying. Scold took a deep breath. I have done all I can to prepare you. We have practiced flying in formation. We have rehearsed how to get mighty warriors onto your horses without hurting yourselves. Lift with your knees, Lotta muttered. You have been tested on selecting the best warriors out of the bunch. Today is a chance to prove yourselves once and for all. Her voice boomed around the empty courtyard, making a pile of abandoned helmets ring metallically. I believe some of you are more ready for this responsibility than others, Scold continued, definitely not looking at Lotta. Needless to say, if you can do it well, you could all be on the way to becoming Class 2 Valkyries. A short trainee with an intense expression squeaked with excitement. Flea raised her hand. Please, Scold, what happens if we don't bring a warrior back? Flea giggled and looked at Lotta. Scold scowled as she stuck a spiky helmet on her head. Just bring one back, okay? It's pretty basic stuff. If you can't master this, well, then you can't be a Valkyrie. Not even a Class 3. Scold's eyes lingered on Lotta a moment. The girl puffed up her chest and pushed her shoulders back. Unfortunately, Thighbiter chose that moment to try and bite her on the leg again. As she spun in circles, tugging on Thighbiter's reins, Lotta could hear Flay and Flea sniggering. Scold turned away, bringing her horse into position at the head of the group. Lotta nudged Thighbiter to follow. He did so, barging Flay and her horse out of the way. Watch where you're going, snotface, Flay snarled, flicking out one of her long silver plaits. It slapped Lotta in the face. Ow! Flay smirked and went to pull her plait back. Unfortunately, that's where it all went wrong. Flay's hair had become tangled around the spikes of Lotta's metal breastplate. She was stuck. Flay gave the plait a hard yank and Lotta lurched sideways, half out of her saddle, one foot still caught in Thighbiter's stirrups. The two girls and their horses danced around in tight circles. Get her off me! Flay shrieked at her sister, who unhelpfully grabbed Lotta's arm and tried to pull her away from Flay. Get her off me! Lotta yelled back. She shook off Flea and started pulling at the hair caught in her armour with one hand while gripping tightly onto Thighbiter's reins with the other. Thighbiter took the opportunity to joyfully try and bite lumps out of everyone. Scold thundered her way back towards them. What's going on here? It's all her fault. She hit me first. Make her go. She always ruins everything. Nay! Scold snorted, raised an eyebrow, and they all fell silent. Their teacher pulled out a short knife from her belt. There seems to be only one thing to do. Lotta's eyes grew wide as Scold approached. Flay tried to flinch away but was trapped. In one swift motion, Scold leaned forward in her saddle, slicing through the hair caught in Lotta's armour. The girls were free. Flay slowly straightened up, lifted the remains of her hair in one hand, and gazed at it in horror. She now had one long, gleaming plait reaching her waist and one silvery tuft that barely reached her shoulder. Her sister's face went completely white. Lotta slowly pulled the remains of the plait out of her armour. Do you want this? She held out the hair. Flay snatched at the plait. She closed her eyes and opened her mouth to scream. Ah! It was very loud and very high-pitched. The horses, all around, twitched and flattened their ears. We're going to get you for this, Lotta, Flea hissed as she dragged her shocked sister away. Just wait. Lotta sighed. Nothing new there then. Thighbiter brayed clearly, delighted with himself. Flea and Flay stopped sulking. It's only hair, Scold called to the twins. Now get into line. Sitting regally astride Thundertrumper, Scold returned to her position at the head of the group. Flea and Flay grumpily joined them. I shall now open the gate. Scold clicked her fingers, and Acrid reached for a heavy iron key hanging on the gate post. made by dwarves. This key is the only way to open the gates and leave Asgard. Skuld plucked the key out of the girl's fingers. Never try this without me. You don't want to get lost and end up in the wrong world, do you? The Class 2 Valkyries giggled as the trainees shook their heads. Although they had all pored over the map of Yggdrasil that hung in Valhalla, none of them had ever been allowed to go exploring. Lotta quite fancied a trip to Jotunheim, which was full of snow, or Alfheim, which was made of meadows, but nobody wanted to visit Helheim or Niflheim, the lowest and most miserable of all the 9 worlds. Now, Skuld continued, remember to turn your invisibility gauntlets on before we leave. Yeah, we don't want you being spotted and frightening the humans, called out the girl with the dreadlocks. With a wave of relief, Lotta twisted the centre strip of the gauntlet covering her left forearm. Her arm flickered, then vanished, along with the rest of her and Thigh-biter. She could do with being invisible for a while, just to stop Flea and Flay giving her the evils. Around her were a series of clicks. Looking towards her fellow trainees, Lotta could hear the sound of gently clinking armour and shifting hooves, but could see nothing. With a thump, something struck her helmet, knocking it into her eyes. She thought she had heard a muffled snigger. "Let's do the chant," Skuld bellowed from somewhere in front of her. "Who do we want? Heroes and great warriors. When do we want them? Now! Where will we put them? In Valhalla! Who will they fight? The Frost Giants! When will they fight them? At Ragnarok! The battle at the end of the world." "End of the world," Lotta echoed. She hoped they had lots of time before then. The 9 worlds were in balance at the moment, but you never knew what the Frost Giants were planning, and when the giants finally made it to Asgard, Ragnarok would begin. She sighed. It would be embarrassing to still be a Class 3 Valkyrie at Ragnarok. You wouldn't get to fight anybody important. Hooves clopped across the courtyard towards the gateway, and the enormous iron gates swung open. "Tally-ho!" echoed Skuld's voice. Sparkling blue hoofprints appeared in the rutted ground, disappearing through the gateway. Flea and Flay followed swiftly behind with their joint cry of "For Odin!" their voices coming together to create a weird harmony which made the hairs on the back of Lotta's neck stand up. The other Class 3 Valkyries galloped along behind them, joining in with their own battle cries. "Midgard or bust! Valhalla forever! Scream if you want to go faster!" Lotta encouraged a reluctant Thigh-biter into a canter. All she had to do now was find a hero. How hard could that be?